There is something just beautifully, perfectly human about asking simple foundational questions, like, is the Earth round or is it flat? Now, at first glance, I know that might sound like a question from the distant past, something that was settled ages ago, packed up, and placed neatly on a dusty shelf in the Museum of Human Knowledge. But let's be honest, this question still absolutely fascinates people today. And it's not just because it's a debate about geography or astronomy, it's because it touches on something so much deeper than that. We're talking about human trust, our perception, the nature of evidence, and really the fundamental ways we make sense of the universe around us. So, in this explainer, we are going to take our time. We're going to slow right down, take a breath, and embark on a really profound, deeply detailed exploration of exactly how we know what we know. I actually want you to pause for a second and really let this ancient question linger in your mind. Because let's validate that feeling for a moment. If you go outside right now and stand in the middle of an open field, or if you're driving down one of those incredibly long, straight highways out in the desert, or even just sitting by the ocean at sunset, the Earth doesn't feel round. It just doesn't. It truly feels perfectly flat. It feels incredibly steady. It feels like this giant, calm, unmoving stage that just stretches out endlessly right beneath your feet. And, that is exactly where our story has to begin today. Not up in a space station, not in some high-tech billion-dollar laboratory, but right here in ordinary, everyday human experience. Our senses are amazing, absolutely, but they aren't perfect. They tell us exactly what the world feels like from the tiny little spot where we're standing, but not always what the world truly is. I want you to think about this analogy for a minute because it really hits the nail on the head. Imagine you take a tiny little ant and you place it right on top of a massive cathedral dome. That ant is going to walk around its entire life thinking the surface beneath it is totally, completely flat. Why? Well, it's certainly not because the ant is foolish or broken. It's simply because the dome is just vastly, unfathomably too large for the ant's tiny point of view. It is entirely a matter of scale. And in much the same way, the Earth is so absolutely mind-bogglingly enormous that from exactly where we stand, its curve is almost completely invisible to us. But here's the kicker. Invisible does not mean absent. So let's ask the question as honestly and patiently as we possibly can. If the Earth is round, how do we actually undeniably know? To answer that, we have to go back. For thousands of years, early humans watched the sky with meticulous life or death care. They needed to know when to plant, when to harvest, when to navigate. And over time, as they watched, these really consistent, repeatable patterns started to emerge. These patterns gave us three massive, undeniable ancient clues pointing to a curved world. We're talking about the shape of lunar eclipses, the shifting of the stars, and the curious way ships sink on the horizon. Let's really dive into each one of these because they're fascinating. Okay, let's start with clue number one, the moon. Specifically, lunar eclipses. During a lunar eclipse, the Earth basically sneaks directly between the sun and the moon, right? And when it does that, it casts a shadow squarely onto the moon's glowing surface. Now, here is the absolutely critical part that ancient astronomers noticed. That shadow is always curved. I mean, always. It's not sometimes curved, and then sometimes a straight line or a square. It doesn't stretch into some random jagged shape. It is always a perfect sweeping curve. To put that into perspective, I want you to imagine you're standing in a pitch-black room. You've got a flashlight in one hand, and you're holding up different objects in front of it to cast shadows on the wall. Maybe a book, a dinner plate, a wooden block, and a tennis ball. As you turn those objects around in your hand, the shadow they cast on the wall completely changes shape depending on the angle, right? A plate can look like a circle, but turn it sideways and it's just a thin line. Except in one special case, a perfect sphere. A sphere always, always casts a circular shadow, no matter how you spin it, twist it, or turn it. That simple, beautiful observation whispered a powerful truth to ancient thinkers. Whatever the Earth is, it consistently behaves exactly like a giant sphere. So, let's move on to our next observation and see how this builds our case. The stars. If you travel significantly far north, you'll notice that certain stars climb higher and higher into the night sky. But if you turn around and travel way down south, those northern stars will completely vanish below the horizon behind you, while a whole new set of stars rises up in front of you. Now think about it. This is definitely not what we would expect to happen on a perfectly flat surface that just extends endlessly in every direction. If the Earth were a flat plane, you'd generally be able to see the same sky no matter where you were. But it is exactly what we would expect on a curved world. Picture yourself standing on a giant, oversized beach ball. As you literally walk around the curved surface of that ball, your view of the ceiling and the room around you naturally changes. Not because the room itself is spinning or the ceiling is dancing around, but simply because your physical position on that curved surface has fundamentally tilted your perspective. And then, of course, there was the horizon. Long before we had modern telescopes or radar, sailors standing on the docks noticed something incredibly curious. When a ship sailed away out into the open ocean, it didn't just slowly shrink into a tiny, complete little boat until it vanished, like a toy car rolling away across a giant, flat gymnasium floor. That's not what happened. Instead, the bottom of the ship, the hull, disappeared first, then the lower sails. Then, finally, the topmost mast faded into the distance. This is one of those observations that feels kind of small until you really sit down and think about the geometry of it. The sea actually appears to swallow the ship from the bottom upward. And that is exactly how a curved surface works. It's exactly like watching a friend walk away from you down the far side of a grassy hill. First, their shoes disappear from your line of sight, then their legs, then their torso, until only the very top of their head is left before they're gone. The horizon, it turns out, is not a flat wall at the end of the world. It is the physical, literal edge of the Earth's curvature. But, perhaps the absolute most elegant proof of all came from an experiment so remarkably simple, so clever, that it honestly almost feels like poetry. Enter a Greek scholar named Eratosthenes. Over 2,000 years ago, this man set the stage for one of the most brilliant scientific deductions in all of human history. Let's remember the context here. He had no satellites, he had no space stations, no calculators, just pure human curiosity, a solid grasp of basic geometry, and the light of the sun. He possessed a mind that was sharp enough to trust physical, mathematical evidence over basic, everyday human instinct. So what did Eratosthenes actually observe? Let's really take our time and unpack this, because it is just a beautiful, beautiful piece of history. He learned that far to the south, in the city of Sienne, which is near modern-day Aswan in Egypt, on one very specific day of the year, the summer solstice, at exactly noon, the sun stood perfectly dead center overhead. The sunlight reached straight down to the very bottom of a deep water well. Vertical pillars and sticks cast absolutely zero shadow, none whatsoever. But Eratosthenes himself was living and working in Alexandria, a city far to the north of Sienne. And he noticed something crucial. On that exact same day of the year, and at that exact same time of noon, vertical objects in Alexandria did cast a visible shadow. I really want you to stop for a second and truly feel the brilliance of this realization. It is the exact same sun. It is the exact same date. It is the exact same time of day, yet there are completely different shadows in the two cities. Now, if the Earth were completely flat and the sun's rays were coming down from millions of miles away, the sunlight reaching both of those cities should arrive at nearly the exact same angle. The shadows should match perfectly, but they didn't. So what did he do with this massive contradiction? He didn't just guess. He didn't just ignore it. He measured it. Step 1. Eratosthenes measured the exact angle of the shadow being cast by a stick in Alexandria. It was about 7.2 degrees. Step 2. He needed the physical distance between the two cities of Sienne and Alexandria, and history tells us he likely used the known travel times of camel caravans to estimate this distance. Step 3. Knowing that 7.2 degrees is roughly 1/50th of a full 360-degree circle, and knowing that the sun's rays arrive essentially parallel to Earth, he used that shadow's angle to multiply the distance between the cities by 50. He calculated the entire circumference of the Earth. With just a stick in the ground, a shadow, and some pacing between cities, this man measured the size of our entire world. And astonishingly, his math was remarkably close to exactly what we know it to be today with all our modern lasers and satellites. I mean, that is one of the most deeply human, triumphant moments in the history of science. And the best part? You can literally repeat a version of this experiment yourself today. Find a friend in a different city, get 2 sticks, and measure the shadows at solar noon. You don't have to just blindly believe it. You can test reality with your own 2 hands. But even after hearing all of that, a really understandable, lingering question remains for a lot of people. If the Earth is round, why on earth doesn't it look round to us? Well, to put it simply, the Earth is nearly 8,000 miles across, and scale changes absolutely everything. Think about a tiny individual drop of water. To the naked human eye, it looks perfectly smooth, maybe like a little piece of glass. But put that exact same drop under a powerful microscope, and it reveals this chaotic, complex world of texture and motion. Human intuition works beautifully, but it's tuned to a human scale. A few miles here, a few miles there. But the Earth is not human scale. It is nearly 8,000 miles of massive planetary scale. If you stand on a small basketball, you are going to feel the curvature instantly under your feet. But if you stand on a ball that is 8,000 miles wide, that curve unfolds far, far, far more gently than your eyes can easily detect. This is exactly why the instinct of, well, it looks flat to me, is completely understandable. It makes sense why we feel that way. It's just mathematically incomplete. It's kind of like looking at train tracks. When you look down a long set of train tracks, they look like they eventually merge together at the horizon, right? But we logically know those steel rails never actually meet. Our eyes report one thing, measurement and geometry reveal the truth. And this whole idea brilliantly illustrates the core difference in how we explain everyday phenomena. Let's look at how the different models handle reality. Consider time zones. Right now, as we speak, while one part of the world is waking up to the bright morning light, another part is sitting down for dinner, and another part is fast asleep in the dead of night. The globe model explains this with effortless simplicity. The Earth is just simply rotating. It creates a gradual sunrise that sweeps from east to west. A flat model, on the other hand, requires these incredibly complex, totally contradictory rules for how the sun's light just magically stops shining in certain areas, like a spotlight with an invisible lampshade. Now think about the seasons. A globe with a tilted spherical axis explains why seasons are completely opposite in the northern and southern hemispheres perfectly and predictably every single year. A flat model requires a really stressful, complicated patchwork of separate, constantly changing explanations for why the sun moves the way it does. You see, a good scientific explanation ties many different observations together quietly, with economy, without needing endless, complicated repairs just to keep the theory standing. Let's move from the ancient world and talk about the sheer, undeniable logistics of our modern world. One of the absolute strongest real-world confirmations of the globe is simply how we travel. Think about actual commercial airline flights taking place right now in the Southern Hemisphere. Routes between cities like Santiago in Chile, Johannesburg in South Africa, and Sydney in Australia. On a spherical globe, the travel times, the fuel required, and the distances of these flights make perfect, predictable, mathematical sense. But if you take those exact same real-world journeys and plot them on a flat Earth map, it completely falls apart. To make those flights work on a flat model in the time it actually takes them to fly, airplanes would have to travel at physically impossible supersonic speeds or take bizarre, jagged routes that simply do not match reality. The global world of aviation, international shipping, and the GPS on your phone does not function because millions of pilots and engineers are collectively pretending. Your phone's GPS works because it's communicating with a network of satellites orbiting a sphere, and the underlying geometry of that software perfectly matches a real, turning, spherical Earth. The Earth quietly, constantly betrays its true shape through the cold, hard, everyday logistics of modern travel. And of course, we absolutely have to mention space, because while all the ground evidence we've discussed, the shadows, the math, the stars, is incredibly layered, beautifully ancient, and completely repeatable, we also happen to live in a modern era where we have direct visual confirmation. Astronauts have looked out of tiny windows and seen the curve of the Earth with their own human eyes. We have thousands of satellites orbiting it every single day to give us our weather forecasts and our internet. And hey, it's not just big, secretive government agencies doing this. Amateur high-altitude weather balloons launched by regular private citizens, high school students, and weekend hobbyists have captured unedited footage showing the clear, undeniable curvature of the Earth, using just standard off-the-shelf cameras you can buy at a local store. What Eratosthenes had to brilliantly infer through the careful mathematics of shadows 2 millennia ago, you and I can now simply look at and see on video. Which naturally brings us to a really vital, truly fascinating psychological question. Despite all of this overwhelming evidence, the shadows in the wells, the disappearing ships, the GPS mathematics, the high-altitude photos, seeing is still not always enough for everybody. Why? Why do some people still passionately, genuinely believe the Earth is flat? It's really crucial that we approach this question not with arrogance or mockery, but with genuine, deep empathy. Because it's not always because people lack intelligence. Not at all. Often, it begins with a very healthy, very normal human instinct, the instinct to question authority. And let's be fair, history is absolutely full of moments where questioning the establishment, pushing back on what we were told, is exactly what opened the door to the actual truth. Plus, human beings are natural storytellers. We love a good mystery. We love the thrill of thinking we've uncovered some grand secret truth that everybody else has somehow missed. But, and this is important, there is a vital boundary we have to recognize here. There is a profound, fundamental difference between skepticism and denial. Skepticism says, show me the evidence, prove it. Skepticism opens the door to honest investigation. Denial, on the other hand, says no evidence will ever be enough. Imagine someone walking into a courtroom and completely rejecting every single eyewitness, every clear photograph, and every piece of DNA evidence, simply because they already dislike the conclusion the evidence points to. That is not investigating reality. That is just fiercely protecting a pre-existing belief. Doubt is incredibly important in science. It's the engine of discovery. But doubt becomes dangerous when suspicion itself is treated as proof. Evidence is our compass, but a compass is only useful to us if we are actually willing to walk in the direction it points.
Now, just to be perfectly scientifically precise before we wrap up, reality is always richer, messier, and more nuanced than a simple cartoon drawing. If we faithfully follow that compass of evidence all the way to the end, we actually find that the Earth is not a perfect, flawless billiard ball sphere. It is what physicists call an oblate spheroid. Because the Earth is spinning so fast, the centrifugal force actually causes it to bulge just slightly outward at the equator, and it gets slightly flattened out at the North and South poles. So it's a vast, slightly squashed world wrapped in these incredibly deep oceans and swirling weather systems, turning silently through the vacuum of space. It is subtle, it's complex, and it is deeply, deeply fascinating. It's a wonderful reminder that reality doesn't have to perfectly match our simplistic first impressions in order to be incredibly beautiful. So the Earth is round. Not because a textbook demanded you believe it or an authority figure said so, but because the physical evidence beautifully, consistently, and stubbornly converges on that one single truth. Century after century, from the curved shadow creeping across the moon, to the brilliant mathematics of a wooden stick in Egypt, to the routing of a commercial airliner today, reality keeps giving us the exact same answer. I want to leave you with this final powerful thought. Truth does not fear questions. You can and should question the sky, question the maps, question the cameras, and absolutely question the experts. Honest questioning is never the enemy of truth. But if we are going to question honestly, we must also be brave enough to accept the answer when the evidence is magnificently, undeniably clear. Are you willing to follow the evidence, even when it challenges what your own two eyes think they see? Wisdom isn't just about asking bold questions. It's about recognizing a real answer when it finally arrives. Thanks for slowing down and exploring the shape of our beautiful, turning world with me in this explainer today. Keep wondering, keep measuring, and I'll see you next time.